All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's May 20th, 2025. Today's webinar is Challenges and Needs of the U.S. Grape and Wine Industry. Welcome back to our Research and Winemaking webinar series. Thanks for being with us today. We hope you will enjoy this webinar and will develop knowledge and learn new skills to be used in your vineyard and winery. I'm Drew Horton, a research specialist of enology at the University of Minnesota's Grape Breeding and Enology Project. And I'm co-hosting this webinar with my friend and colleague, Dr. Aude Watrelot, an assistant professor and extension specialist of enology in the Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition at Iowa State University. Before starting the webinar, we've got a few brief instructions. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on YouTube in the next few weeks. The webinars, over 30 from the past 5 years, are already published and available with this link, which is either on your screen or we will put that in the chat box. And speaking of the chat box, it's an important function today. We hope you have questions during the presentations and after. Please type your questions into the chat box, and you can find that here on WebEx at the bottom of your screen by clicking on the 1, 2, 3 dots. There's a little stack of 3 dots there. Your questions, again, will be answered during and at the end of the webinar. So today we have a broad presentation incorporating some enology, some viticulture, and some marketing. We're going to go about 45 minutes, and we're going to hear from first Dr. Aude Watrelot, Iowa State University, then Dr. Patty Skinkis from Oregon State University, Dr. Andreea Botezatu from Texas A&M, and Dr. Dan McCole from Michigan State University. They will present the findings of their USDA SCRI research and extension planning project, focusing on the identification of the challenges and needs of the grape and wine industry across the U.S., and more importantly, the development of a strategic plan. This presentation will be kept engaging, we hope, through some poll questions, survey questions, and the ability for you to ask questions during and after the presentation. So let me introduce our speakers today. We've got 4 of them. Again, this may take a few minutes. Firstly, Dr. Aude Watrelot, again, assistant professor of enology at Iowa State University. Dr. Watrelot's research area is fruit, grape, and wine tannin and polysaccharide chemistry and their relationship with wine quality. Dr. Watrelot graduated with a PhD degree in food science from the French National Institute for Agricultural Research, INRA, and the University of Avignon in France. Following graduation, Dr. Watrelot moved to California, both at Cal State Fresno and UC Davis, to keep conducting her research into polyphenol macromolecular interactions in red wine chemistry. At Iowa State, she is currently conducting research and outreach on understanding viticultural and winemaking practices that can maximize phenolics extraction and improve wine quality. She is currently serving as the chair for the American Society of Enology and Viticulture, Eastern Section, and as the vice president for the group Polyphenols. And then, scrolling, thank you, Dr. Patty Skinkis conducts applied viticultural research and extends critical information to the Oregon wine grape industry through leadership of the statewide viticulture extension program. Her research focuses on practical viticultural and vine physiology, including areas such as yield and canopy management, vineyard floor management, rootstocks, and vine nutrition. Dr. Skinkis works closely with the Oregon industry, leading state and regional technical groups and collaborating with industry and university groups to develop and enhance research and outreach efforts. In addition, she teaches viticultural courses on campus and developed innovative delivery mechanisms that combine student and industry outreach. Dr. Botezatu received her honors bachelor degree in horticulture, majoring in enology from the University of Agronomy and Veterinary Sciences. I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Ion Ionescu de la Brad in Iași, Romania in 2000, and her master's degree in agricultural management from the same university in 2001. From 2000 to 2006, she worked as a commercial winemaker in Europe and in Canada. She obtained her PhD in enology in 2013 from Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, where she then held a postdoctoral position from 2013 to 2015. In 2017, Andreea joined the faculty of the Department of Horticultural Sciences at Texas A&M University as an assistant professor and extension enology specialist. Her mission is to service the Texas winemaking industry through applied research, as well as through developing educational opportunities for current and prospective winemakers. Dr. Botezatu's previous work focused on wine aroma compounds and wine fault remediation, with a focus on methoxypyrazines and ladybug taint. Her approach was both from a chemical perspective as well as one from sensory evaluation. Currently, Andreea is directing her research towards solving wine quality issues associated with hot climate winemaking, problems such as low total acidity, high pH, wine color instability, and microbiological instability. Her interest continues to focus on chemical as well as sensory aspects as they relate to wine quality. Texas wine consumer attitudes are also an area of interest for Dr. Botezatu's research. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Dan McCole is an associate professor in the Department of Community Sustainability at Michigan State University. Dan's scholarship primarily addresses the challenge faced by tourism businesses in rural areas and examines the role agricultural tourism plays in community and community sustainability. A major focus of Dan's research and outreach has involved the wine industry in non-traditional wine regions. And Dan, I'm glad you're here because I think most of our attendees are from non-traditional wine regions. Dan has led over a dozen research projects and economic impact studies involving wineries, wine consumers, and communities that attract wine tourists. Dan has also written dozens of applied articles and research briefs for non-academic audiences and is a frequent speaker at wine industry events, having given over 35 presentations at wine industry conferences in the US and abroad. And again, thank you all for being here. Aude, the floor is yours.
Right. Thank you so much, Drew, for all those introductions. That was a little bit long, but it's good. At least you know now who we are and what we're gonna tell you today. So that's before starting, I would like to have a few information from you. Where are you joining us today? So if you can scan the QR code, if you are, hopefully you are you have your phone, so you can scan the QR code, and then you have a password, which is 7SB8RR. And just let us know where you are from, because we're going to be talking about the challenges and the needs of the US grape and wine industry. So that's really to discuss about all the US. So every state is going to be mentioned today. So we have some Minnesota, Oregon, Nebraska, Portland, Oregon. Ooh, Minnesota and Oregon. So I'm just gonna leave you, give you a few minutes just to do that. That's really also to check that you're able to use that code and share your insight with us. We're gonna use that Slido all along the presentation. So that's a good way for you to interact. So if you have any questions, as we said, you can use the chat box, but you can also let us know what you think with those. Thank you for sharing the passcode in that state where you are from. So we have Iowa, Austria. I think I know who is in Austria. Maybe Dan. Oregon, Michigan. All right, California, Texas, Iowa. All right. Good. So we're gonna, as I said, we're gonna talk about challenges and needs of the grape and wine industry in different regions of the US. So we split the map of the US in 4. So considering the West region, Midwest, Northeast, and South of the US. And so we worked with all the states. We tried to gather information from all the states. So hopefully you're gonna learn about your specific region today. All right. Okay. the goal of the project, so today, talking about challenges and needs of the grape and wine industry in the US, that's really the findings that we obtained during a USDA SCRI research and extension planning project that started in 2023 and that's still ongoing. The goal of that project that was to identify the common and unique industry's challenges across diverse climates and production systems of the US grape and wine industry. So just to give you a little bit more background about that project. So that's a project that has been developed after a few years of trying to get funding from USDA to help the industry of the US. And so that was really based on the background. So the context is really the US grape and wine industry has expanded over the last 50 years, now spanning all 50 states and contributing over $276 billion to the economy. We know that California alone accounts for $88 billion. However, much of this success relies on Vitis vinifera grape cultivars. But that's really a cultivar, or those cultivars are thriving in Mediterranean climates, but struggles in the majority of the US regions due to the low cold tolerance and vulnerability to pest and disease. And so the US industry has remained dominated by Vitis vinifera because that's the main cultivars or the main species that consumers know, and that is making a high quality wines. So that's also, especially because the market is the preferred market. However, there are environmental and economic burdens on growers, especially as the climate change intensifies those challenges, like disease outbreaks, frost risk, and extreme weather. And so, fortunately, there are new wine regions, especially in the Midwest, in the Northeast and Southeast, that have emerged by adopting resilient and regionally adapted cultivars that are bred through different breeding programs. These cultivars offer increased disease resistance and climate tolerance, but the knowledge gaps remain in how to best grow those cultivars, how to best vinify those cultivars, and how to market them. Especially as the consumers are still really going to the traditional regions like California. So in order to address those challenges, we wanted to develop that project to gather all data, to have real data that can be used in the future, to develop a strategic plan. So the goal is really to address those challenges using research and extension and outreach priorities to become a more resilient industry. The final goal of that project was also to develop a USDA SCRI proposal to get funding to be able to work on that research and extension aspect of those different priorities. So we developed a team of different disciplines. So we had academic people, but we also worked with industry stakeholders to gather all competencies from viticulture, enology, business and marketing, breeding programs. And so I'm the leader of this project at Iowa State University. I was also the leader of the Midwest focus group, and you're going to learn a little bit more what I mean by focus group. Kane Hickey from Penn State University was the co-leader of this project. He was also the leader of the Northeast focus group region. He couldn't make it today with us, but I'm gonna share his voice with you. Andreea, so who is with us today, she's the leader of the South focus group region. Patty is the leader of the West focus group region. And then we worked with, as I said, plenty of different disciplines and different collaborators across the US. So we worked from different regions and different competencies. So just to keep learning a little bit more about you, can you answer that question about your role in the wine grape industry? So once again, scan the QR code, or if you still have the app on your phone, you can complete that. The passcode is 7SV8RR. So we've got viticulture, vineyard management, academia, and then some enology, sales marketing. Wow, those numbers are changing so fast. So mainly viticulture. Right. I think most of you were able to respond. So most of you are from viticulture, but we have academia, we have sales and marketing, and enology winemaking. And so that's really good to see that we have a good range of role, because that's what we focus our energy on. We really try to understand what's happening in viticulture, what's happening in enology, and what's happening in business and marketing. So what we did in 2024, so as I said at the beginning, the project started in 2023, the end of 2023. So the first thing that we did was to develop a survey that was provided nationally. So we did provide that survey to everybody. So maybe some of you participated in this survey. That was to provide all answers on questions that were related to the challenges or the concerns that industry members have in terms of viticulture, and then in terms of enology and business and marketing. Growers and winemakers and everybody in the industry had to rate the top challenges. So they had to explain to us what were the top challenges for those different group of work. So viticulture, enology, and business marketing. And then after obtaining all the responses from the survey, we did organize a focus group meetings that was split in 4 different regions. So the West, Northeast, Midwest, and South region. And that was to come up with a little bit more details about the response we obtained in the surveys. After those focus group meetings, we organized a strategic planning meeting that was done in July 2024, and that was really to develop strategy. So understanding every challenges that we had in the nation, depending on the different regions and depending on the states, but trying to come up with a plan. So, the survey overall, so you can see the map first of the US, how it was split in 4 different regions. So we really try to use the USDA map. Sometimes we had to adjust a little bit depending on some states, depending on the climate or their location where they were. But overall, you can see the West, Midwest, Northeast, and South. We had a total of 1,145 surveys. Those surveys were all surveys not only completed. So we had some surveys that were not complete. And that's why the number of participants were 792. That's really the number of participants the number of completed surveys. So that's the data that we were able to use for everything else. We were able to cover 40 states. So maybe in your states, we didn't have any participants. So we won't be able to show those values or those data. Overall, so we had a good representation between the different regions, and you can see the number of states that were per region, the number of responses per region. You can also see that we had 40 participants that were NA, and that's because the region were not explained at the beginning. So the participant didn't say where they were located. So we couldn't use those data as the different regions challenges. So Patty is going to explain you the data we obtained during the survey as well as the focus group meeting for the viticulture section.
Okay, great. So the viticulture section, like Aude said, is going to be focusing on largely the survey data that came across, but also some of the focus group results. And let's make sure that I can advance. Okay, so one of the questions we asked was how long those who filled out the survey had been involved in grape production. And so what you see here is the distribution of survey respondents based on their experience. The light blue bar, which is the biggest bar in at least the South, West, and Northeast, was more than 20 years. So we had a good proportion of people who had a lot of years of experience and could give us a lot of that institutional knowledge as to how what the challenges are based on both the past and the current situation. But we have a good distribution of people that are also in very early stages of their experience, and many that are in that 10 to 15 year range of experience. So this was good to see that we were getting feedback from experienced individuals. And then the top 3 viticultural challenges, when we look at across all of the data we received, was disease management was number 1, pest management was number 2, and environmental conditions were number 3. Now, I think one of the things that we should say here was that when they filled out the survey, this was based on categories that they could choose from. So in the environment one, you see there's a list of flood, fire, spring frost. Those were an option that people were given to choose from. So we didn't get to drill down deeply into what that meant for a specific region. So these were the top 3 viticultural challenges. And this was not, when this question was asked, it was from a standpoint of just very plainly, what are your biggest challenges? We didn't get into depth about near term, long term, and those sorts of things. Now, if we look at regional influence, if we start breaking that down based on West, Midwest, Northeast, and South, we see that overwhelmingly the disease management comes up in all regions. So West, Northeast, and South, but surprisingly, the Midwest didn't have it as their top challenge. I interpret that as disease management is always a challenge for the Midwest. Having done my viticultural training before coming out West, was in the Midwest, and disease management is such a big part of what they do to just survive that the number 1 challenge there was the environment or the climate. But if you look across the other regions, in the top 3 is environmental conditions. So whether that is frosts or wildfire, they're still in the top 3 challenges. And if we look specifically at the Western states, which I was part of leading the focus group for this, but this is the challenges from the survey, we see that regardless of state that we included in the focus group, so California, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, disease management is challenge number 1. So this kind of becomes an interesting question because the disease management in terms of being an ideal location to grow grapes, nationally speaking, is the West Coast. And yet we still have these large disease management concerns because it's a big part of either short-term or long-term management of vineyards is dealing with powdery mildew, botrytis, virus, etc. That's all lumped into one. The secondary challenges or tertiary challenges that line up is environmental conditions. Interestingly enough, Colorado doesn't have it as one of their top 3, but I think again, Colorado has a lot more challenges in environment compared to the rest of the West Coast states to deal with. And so that didn't rise to the top. They're dealing with that overall. Another one that comes up is availability of labor. So for Oregon and Colorado, is challenge number 2nd or 3rd. And I should mention the pest management refers to anything other than the disease. So probably insect related, could be voles. In the Midwestern states, the breakdown there, disease management for 3 of the 5 or 6 states is disease management. Pest management, environment become really key concerns. So Nebraska, North Dakota, likely the cold winter injury would be my guess from that list. Challenge number 2 is pest management for the majority, but that's where labor comes in for Iowa. And then environmental conditions, some vine balance starts to show up. We did see a little bit of that in the western states as well, that vine canopy management, vine growth, probably just dealing with the amount of vigor that you can have in those situations, whether it's the climate related vigor or related to the cultivars being grown. So we see some of this, a lot of it relating to just input costs, even though we don't ask them that, probably just high input costs and dealing with both disease and the vine balance. For the Northeast states, unanimously, it's disease management is number 1. Number 2, it's pest management. So pests are key. We see vine balance come up as well as either second or third, depending on the state. So those canopy management costs related to probably high vigor. There's some labor availability as well coming up in the top. So clearly labor availability, just cost of doing all of this management is likely playing a role in the responses. The southern states, again, disease management, number 1. So pest management, number 2. Environment comes either 2 or 3, depending on the state. And again, we see availability of labor and then vine balance coming up. So just dealing with that excess vigor would be my guess for Texas, as well as, let's see, I think it was just Texas there, knowing that the climate is such that you're dealing with a lot of vigor. So some strategies to deal with this, some of this came up in the survey, but also the focus groups, was that no matter where people were located, there's this concern about weather shifts, and both in season and across years, we're just, what that focuses on, whether it's drought in the West or having too much rain in the Midwest and the East, hot summers, frost events. So the occurrence of more frost events, whether they're in the spring or the fall, and then low winter temperatures, hail, wildfires. All of these are strategies that we wanted to be able to come up with, or at least as a universal group across the U.S., try to deal with some of these. Of course, a lot of the concerns about labor costs and input costs, the best way to strategize around that is to mechanize to reduce labor costs. Also, ways that we can design our vineyards better, use better training systems or different vineyard design to better manage vine vigor and to allow for reduced input costs with canopy management. So that goes back to cultivar selection, rootstock selection, trying to devigorate vines, or conversely, if we need to increase vigor, depending on the location. A lot of what came up too is just being able to refine harvest decisions. A lot of concerns around just not knowing what to expect with these climate shifts, and knowing how to make those decisions when it's really challenging. If you've got rains coming, or you've had significant crop losses, and having harvest decisions both near term and when you need to pick, or how do you deal with having significantly reduced yields because of some of these weather shifts and the impacts on the vines. Lots of comments came up about vertebrate pests, whether it's birds or voles. I know on the West, we deal with a lot of voles, and also how to deal with herbicide drift. That becomes a concern in nearly every region as well. So coming up with strategies to deal with that. One thing I want to say before we move on to the enology group is that I think there was a slide initially about how much vinifera is being grown in the different states. And why we see disease management as one of the top things that concerns the whole region. I believe really in the West Coast, we are growing much more vinifera, and that makes, we don't have the disease resistance in the vinifera. So we're spending a lot of time in the West Coast dealing with controlling for powdery mildew, and now we're left with, a significant amount of input costs around disease management, whereas the rest of the nation has much worse conditions and more disease pressures. And they deal with that by using different cultivars, and a future strategy that even the West Coast is starting to think about, and I say just starting to think about, is improved varieties. And that's something that longer term we need to consider as a whole nation, not just based on these specific areas, if we truly want to become reducing our input costs for disease management and becoming truly more organic, biodynamic, and reducing total chemical use. So I just want to make that comment there. But thanks.
Thank you, Patty. That was great. And so if you have any questions, you can use the chat box right now. And I think everything that you mentioned is going to be related to what we will say in enology. So Andreea is going to talk about enology now. But yeah, so the discussion is open, and we're going to have a little bit more time at the end to discuss about all of that. Thanks, Patty. You're on mute, Andreea. All right, let me take the control just to give you. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There was no button to unmute myself, or I couldn't find it anyway. Sorry about that.
All right. Yep.
Okay, so can I,
Mhm.
do I have controls here? I do. So we're moving
Yep.
on to enology. My talk is going to be very similar to Patty's, structured similarly, starting with the questions, the overall questions at the national level that we sent out in the survey. So this chart shows how long participants in different US regions have been involved in wine production, with responses grouped by experience level. And starting with the West, this is where we had most of our respondents. We see a clear standout with a majority of respondents here. Over 70 people reported having more than 20 years of experience. And this suggests a mature and well-established industry presence in that region. The West also shows consistent representation across all the other experience brackets, indicating a diverse mix of early career and veteran professionals. Moving on to the Northeast, there's also a strong contingent of highly experienced individuals, with about 40 respondents reporting over 20 years of experience. And interestingly, this region also has notable clusters in the 10 to 14 and 15 to 20 year ranges, suggesting steady generational continuity in the workforce. Then moving on to the Midwest, things appear more evenly distributed, with respondents primarily in the 10 to 20 year range. However, relatively few individuals have more than 20 years experience here, which can imply a younger or a more transitional workforce in that area. And finally, the South shows the smallest overall participation. The most common experience range here are the 10 to 14 years and over 20 years, each with about 10 respondents. This suggests a smaller but potentially seasoned group of professionals in the region. And overall, the data shows regional differences in workforce longevity, with the West and Northeast leading in long-term experience, while the South and Midwest present more modest or transitional profiles. The next question was, how many cases of wine do you or your company produce annually? And the chart here shows this production volume and how it varies across the different regions. Again, starting with the West, we see a broad distribution of winery sizes. The majority of respondents produce between 5,000 and 50,000 cases annually, indicating a strong presence of small but scalable operations. And the West also has the highest representation of medium, that's 50,000 to 500,000 cases, and even large wineries, producing over 500,000 cases, highlighting the region's maturity and diversity in production scale. The Northeast shows a similar pattern, though with no large-scale producers, or at least none that answered our survey. Here, the most common winery size is again the 5,000 to 50,000 cases range, closely followed by very small wineries producing 1,000 and between 1 and 5,000 cases. The Northeast also has a significant number of limited production wineries, those producing under 1,000 cases, suggesting a balance between boutique operations and more established businesses. Moving to the Midwest, production is more modest here. As you can see, most respondents fall into the limited or very small category, with very few producing over 50,000 cases annually. This points to a region with a predominantly small scale or developing wine industry. And in the South, we observe the lowest overall production levels. Most wineries here are either limited production or very small, with almost no representation in the medium or large scale categories. And this supports the view of the South as an emerging wine region with smaller operations, likely catering to local or niche markets. And again, overall, the data highlights the diversity of the US wine industry, with the West and Northeast leading in both production volume and winery scale, while the South and Midwest tend to host smaller, more localized producers. In terms of enology challenges, the data show that the top 3 ones at the national level were managing production costs. So the highest ranked challenge is managing production costs. And again, this highlights the financial strain that many wineries face in sourcing ingredients or maintaining equipment or covering labor costs, especially for small and mid-sized operations where margins are tight. Closely following, we have microbial spoilage, which reflects ongoing concerns about wine stability and wine quality. And we have everything from Brettanomyces, lactic acid bacteria, oxidative spoilage, controlling microbes. These all remain major hurdles in the cellar, particularly so in regions where either minimal intervention styles are popular or we have high pH wines. And then the third most significant challenge is managing wine acidity, and that kind of goes hand in hand, especially on the high pH side of things, low acidity, high pH. But we can also have the opposite problem of high acidity, a low pH. So managing wine acidity in general is third most significant challenge. And again, most critical in warmer climates where natural acidity tends to be lower. And that affects wine stability and balance. Looking at the challenges from a regional perspective, this table breaks down our top enology challenges, showing how our winemaking concerns differ across the US. In the West, the most pressing issue is microbial spoilage, followed by production costs and then managing aromatic profiles of the wine. And this category notably includes concerns about smoke taint, reflecting the region's exposure to wildfires and climate-related volatility. This region, the Western, had the largest number of respondents at 165. The Midwest presents a slightly different picture. The top challenge here is managing wine acidity, and this would be on the higher end of the acidity challenge, I would assume, likely due to regional grape composition and the cooler climate variability. This is followed by microbial spoilage and concerns about the quality of available grapes, suggesting difficulties sourcing high quality fruit locally. In the Northeast, production costs are the leading concern, indicating financial pressures in small or developing winery operations. And this is followed by microbial spoilage and the availability of labor. And that's, as we saw, is a challenge that is shared by many different regions. In the South, which had the smallest respondent group at 49 total, so the South is most concerned with microbial spoilage and wine acidity. For the third category, respondents mentioned both production costs and labor availability, emphasizing the compounded challenges of limited resources, high turnover, and managing wine quality under hot climate conditions. Okay. Overall, microbial spoilage appeared as a common thread across all regions, but the secondary challenges vary significantly, and they're shaped by climate, grape availability, and local infrastructure. Looking at the West states, this table kind of drills down in the top challenges there. In California, which had the highest number of respondents at 120. The leading concern is microbial spoilage, followed closely by managing production costs. And the third major challenge is managing the aromatic profile, particularly related to smoke taint. Colorado, a smaller data set with only 4 responses here, highlights a different set of issues. The top concern here is the availability of labor, followed by microbial spoilage and wine acidity management. In Oregon, the primary challenge is again production costs, followed by microbial spoilage. And here we have a unique third concern that involves reporting requirements from business specific to state or federal regulations, which suggests that compliance burdens may be disproportionately affecting small or mid-sized wineries. Washington brings another perspective. Its top concern is managing the aromatic profile of the wines, including smoke taint, followed by microbial spoilage and labor availability. This kind of mirrors California's smoke-related issues and reinforces the West's vulnerability to wildfire-driven aroma challenges. Across the board, microbial spoilage again appears in every state, underscoring it as a national technical challenge. But we have also regional nuances like regulatory burdens in Oregon and labor shortages in Colorado and Washington. In the Midwest states, in Iowa, starting here, the top concern is managing wine acidity, followed by labor availability, with a diverse set of third-tier challenges that include microbial spoilage, aromatic profile management, especially smoke taint, and even inventory and reporting software indicating operational hurdles and alongside winemaking ones. Minnesota leads with concerns about the quality of available grapes, pointing to sourcing limitations, followed by production costs and acidity management. And this suggests that both supply and cost-related challenges are pressing issues in this state. Missouri, though represented by just one respondent here, it identified color stability, acidity, and mouthfeel as key enological challenges. These are all quality-focused concerns likely tied to local varieties and stylistic goals. In Nebraska, production costs are the top issue, followed by the quality of the grapes and microbial spoilage. This mirrors trends in other states with developing wine industries and smaller production scales. North Dakota reflects similar concerns with acidity, microbial spoilage, and the availability of quality grapes. The emphasis on grape sourcing here underscores limitations in local supply chains or suitable cultivars. And finally, Wisconsin, the focus is once again on acidity management, followed by microbial spoilage and labor availability. And these concerns are consistent with broader Midwest trends. Overall, the Midwest, across the Midwest, the 3 themes emerge: managing wine acidity, dealing with microbial spoilage, and sourcing quality grapes.
And Andrea, if I can just add something about the management of aromatic profile, we don't have smoke taint, so that's not the issue, I would say, or the concern for the aromatic profile. That's more depending on the grape varieties that we use for winemaking.
Okay, sorry, then I must have
Right.
misread something. Sorry about that. The Northeast states, starting with Maryland, the top concern is microbial spoilage, followed by production costs and an operational issue, managing space in the production facility. This suggests that smaller physical infrastructure may be a constraint. Moving on to Michigan, the primary issue is managing production costs, followed by labor availability and the quality of grapes, classic growing pains for expanding industries, balancing affordability and quality. New Jersey and New York both highlight cost and labor concerns. New Jersey specifically notes production costs and labor shortages, with acidity management in third place. New York emphasizes microbial spoilage, followed again by costs and labor availability. Ohio, similar challenges, with top concerns being microbial spoilage, production costs, and managing acidity, showing how technical and financial factors can often be intertwined. In Pennsylvania, the primary issue is managing the aromatic profile, including smoke taint again, and followed by microbial spoilage and production costs, suggesting a focus on sensory quality and economic sustainability. Vermont, one respondent only here, points to wine acidity, mouthfeel, and costs as its main enology hurdles. And overall, the Northeast, microbial spoilage and production costs appear consistently, with labor availability and wine acidity management also surfacing frequently. And finally, the South. In North Carolina, the primary challenge is managing production costs, followed by the general availability of grapes and also labor availability. And these reflect operational strains tied to scale, supply limitations, and workforce access. Oklahoma reveals a diverse set of concerns across the respondents, 3 respondents here, and the challenges included color stability, wine acidity, grape quality, water access, and reporting requirements. Notably here, respondents mentioned the importance of water quality and quantity, such as the need of chlorine-free water. In Texas, the focus is clearly on microbial spoilage. Not surprising, we have a lot of high pH grapes and high pH wines, a lot of weather, humidity issues, so microbial spoilage here is a big one, followed by grape availability and also regulatory compliance, particularly around reporting and certifications. For one respondent here, acidity management and grape quality were additional pain points, which aligns with the state's hot climate and high pH challenges, as I mentioned. Virginia shows a consistent pattern, with the other regions citing microbial spoilage as the top issue, followed by wine acidity and production costs. And these responses mirror broader national trends while also highlighting labor and quality concerns. And taken together, the southern producers are particularly concerned with microbial stability, grape sourcing, and regulatory and infrastructure issues, all under the added pressure of economic and environmental constraints. So I don't know, Aude, if he, okay. Did you take it back? There you go.
Sorry. Yeah, you can continue on that slide, and then Dan is going to talk about the business and marketing.
I guess in terms of education and what we can do for our stakeholders as extension professionals and educators, I think we identified education as a key theme in addressing enology challenges all across the industry. But first, we have to remember that good wine starts in the vineyard, and there's a clear need to improve understanding around managing acidity and reducing inconsistencies in grape quality. And these are 2 vineyard level issues that directly impact winemaking outcomes. And then A second concern centers on wine chemistry analysis. That's something that we learned about, that wineries have issues with consistent chemistry analysis and lab analysis. So many winemakers report that lab services take too long to deliver results, and that can create bottlenecks in timely decision making. And this delay underscores the need for better training or in-house testing or alternative analysis workflows. And then we see highlighted that really the enology concerns point to education rather than research as a solution for these problems. And these include familiar but persistent challenges as such as stuck fermentation, wine faults, and their causes, preventing microbial spoilage, wine filtration. So the need and the desire for more education was highlighted through the survey and also during the focus group meetings. As Aude mentioned, I led the Southern Region 1, and that was something that kept coming back, the need for education. How do we reach winemakers? And this is a pain point for us, I think, as extension educators, because the data clearly suggests that winemakers are less likely to engage with traditional academic or extension services. And so what can we do about that? Some solutions could include expanding extension roles to build stronger winemaker networks, hiring more extension enologists overall across the country, and collaborating with community college programs to offer applied training. So the quote on the right sums it up perfectly. Most enology challenges are not subject for research. The work is already done. Avenues for educating the industry need to be explored further. So ultimately, investing in education and outreach may have the highest return for improving wine quality and operational consistency across the U.S. industry.
Right, that was great, Andreea. Thank you so much. And I hope when you're listening and reading all those data, that brings you some questions or some suggestions that we could use in the future to help the viticulture and enology and and business and marketing. So if you have a questions, feel free to use the chat box. We're gonna answer those questions probably at the end. So now I'm gonna share the floor or give the floor to Dan, who is gonna present the wine business and marketing sections.
Before we go there, a few things that Andreea discussed. A couple of the themes that kept coming up were availability of labor and production costs. Those provide the perfect context for some of what I'm going to share, because the production cost of a bottle of wine underlies a lot of the wine business marketing challenges that we'll see. So first of all, good evening. And I say evening because I'm the guy who's in Austria right now. And I thought, looking around at where people are, I thought I'd share a fun little anecdote. Earlier today, so I'm over here teaching at a university that's right in the middle of the Austrian wine, two Austrian wine regions, Kremstal and the Wachau. And they have a wine business program here. And I was finally able to catch up with a friend of mine who's the director of the program. And I love doing that because he brings me down to his cellar with about 2,500 bottles of his, lab cellar. And it's a vaulted room built in the late Roman Empire that's been turned into a modern wine tasting area. But I brought with him I bring him wine every time I come, just whatever I can fit in my suitcase, usually 2 bottles. I brought, lots of Minnesota-based wines, Marquettes and La Crescents and Frontenacs. But this year I brought a Pinot Noir from Willamette Valley. And so for those of you who are out in Oregon, and a sparkling wine from Mobby in Michigan. So the Michigan people there, you can be happy too. And if you know Mobby, it's a good wine. They do a great job there. Okay, so let's go through this same pattern of kind of slides you'll see here. Now, I'm having trouble advancing. There we go. So, we can see this slide that we've seen a couple times before. The two obvious things that sort of stand out are the West and the Northeast show that people have been involved in wine marketing and selling much more so than in the Midwest and in the South. The South, you can see the taller brown bar and the shorter bars overall has a lot more people who are newer to wine marketing and selling. And you can see the West Coast and the Northeast, not surprisingly, have more experience, with the Midwest just a little bit behind them. The top three business marketing challenges, again, this was from the survey that we did. And I remember when we were creating the survey, we had a lot of questions about things like availability of labor or production costs. Where should those be? Should that be in this section or other sections? But in this business marketing challenges, three things sort of rose to the front. One, challenges experienced distributing wine through channels other than winery tasting rooms. As I believe it was Andreea showed earlier, but the chart about the amount of production, we see a lot of small producing wineries here. And, it's no surprise that the major point of distribution for smaller wineries or wineries that produce, less wine is out of the tasting room to visitors. And a lot of these wineries have struggled to figure out, how do we transition to, being able to distribute through more traditional kinds of means, which becomes a challenge. And, one of the major challenges is the production cost per bottle, that we talked about before, becoming, really challenging. But there are other issues there, which we'll talk about in a second, including market legitimacy. The second issue, learning about the profiles of winery visitors. Now, this is, I think, I was happy to see this come up as a major category. And this is especially true for the wineries in, the lesser known, non-traditional areas, because we tend to treat all wine consumers the same. And yeah, I know we definitely do a lot of segmenting. We have the enthusiasts and the image seekers and the, suburban high premium label people, the social newbies, all of these, clever terms that the wine industry has, ways of, we look at generations too. But what I mean is, when we look at consumer behavior, we know that the purchase context makes a big difference in a consumer. So you could have the same consumer who could fall into one of those other categories, who has very different purchasing behavior at a retail shop, at a restaurant, and at a winery. And the interesting thing about visiting a winery is most people are not there primarily to purchase wine. They're there to purchase a wine-themed experience. That's why they're going to a winery. And we know they're coming for an experience, but that really changes in ways I think we underestimate the consumer behavior. And so learning more about the profile of winery visitors, who they are, why they're there, is just as important as all the studies that are done into wine consumers at retail. Because those are the people you're selling to. And how does this interaction between the experience turn into sales of wines? Because that still is a major point of distribution, irrespective of the number one challenge of trying to sell in different places. And then finally, the evolving consumer preferences for alcoholic beverages. I think there are a couple things in here. One is sort of the trends toward drinking alcohol in general, the competition from other sources of or other choices of alcoholic drinks, beer and seltzers and ready to drink cocktails and things like that. It's become much more competitive environment. Then you add into that the sort of generational trends and what we're seeing with Gen Z and the millennials, and people just want to know more about what's going on with consumers, what is their relationship with alcoholic beverages in general, and wine in comparison to some of the other choices. Trying to advance. Thank you. As we look at the challenges by region, I mean, the biggest thing to note here is the West is very different. When it comes to business and marketing challenges, the West is very different from the rest of the country. Unsurprisingly, in the West, evolving consumer preferences is number one, because that is something that is a concern regardless of where you distribute your wine. Regardless of the amount of wine that you're selling, that is a big challenge. Issues with shipping wines, number two, that is obviously a big issue in the West, where most of the wine is produced, and they're producing in larger amounts, and they have the ability to, I think the Midwest and South at least would love to be in a situation where they're thinking about how do we have fewer issues with shipping our wines. Right now, they're not there yet. They would love to be able to have shipping their wines be a major concern, is what we heard from people. Number three, learning about profiles of winery visitors as well. In some of the more established regions out West, there can be differences with the wine tourism product. Wine visits can be used much more as a brand building for people who will then purchase, in other contexts. Whereas in the other regions, again, the knowing about the wineries is because, wanting to know where about the winery, wanting to know more about the winery visitors is because they are coming, that they are at the place where they're going to acquire most of their wine. In the Midwest, we can see learning about the profile of winery visitors becomes higher. Same thing in the South. Again, those two regions, they sell a lot higher percentage of their wine directly from the tasting room or from the winery through the tasting rooms. The number one region or number one concern in the Northeast, challenges experienced distributing wine through channels other than winery tasting rooms. So, the Northeast has a little bit more of a well-established, production, wine businesses, and they're really trying to work their way more into the retailers, where, again, the Midwest and the South just aren't there yet. The Midwest, if you look at secondary challenges in the Midwest, Northeast, and South, challenges in the Midwest experience distributing wine through channels other than winery tasting room, trying to break out of that sort of, that model. HR staffing challenges, labor shortage, training opportunities, diversity, et cetera. Those kind of challenges often require wages to go up, which increases the price of the bottle or of the tasting room experience. Learning about profiles of winery visitors in the Northeast. So again, that's still important. That was the number one concern in the Midwest and South. It is still important in the Northeast because they do sell a lot of wine to winery visitors, and they rely heavily on the wine visitation. And in the South, the secondary is factors that impact satisfaction with the winery experience. This is, I think a lot of places understand what the research shows us, which is the more people are satisfied with their winery experience, the more wine they are willing to buy. And in fact, Miguel Gomez at Cornell a few years back showed that if you can get people from very satisfied to extremely satisfied, they take a really big jump in the amount of wine that they buy at the winery. So getting them to be extremely satisfied with their winery experience can really lead to more wine sales. What was kind of interesting about that study is what led to satisfaction with the winery experience. It wasn't necessarily quality of wine. It was, other things related to service and ambiance and things that really show that people were there for an experience. And if they had a great experience, they bought more wine, but they weren't necessarily there for wine reasons. And then the last challenge is, in the Midwest, Northeast, and South, you can see some of these same themes coming up. Consumer willingness to pay, for lesser known grape varieties is also something that came up in the Midwest a bit, but, in the South. That is a question that, are people willing to pay for wines made with grapes that they haven't heard of? To what extent do we invest energy in trying to get people to know about the different grapes that we have? Do we name the wines, varietals after the grapes, or do we come up with a proprietary name and sort of hide the name of the grape? Those are some of the questions that people have there. Next.
Dan, I'm just going to give you 3 more minutes just to give enough time to participants to ask questions.
Yep, that's fine. So we can see the, I don't know if I have control over that or not. I think it's delayed
Yes,
here.
you do.
Okay. So some of the education extension, education topics that, we think would be welcome based on the information we have. Pricing strategies, promotional strategies, review of relevant laws and taxes, festivals, industry collaboration, how and why, festivals, how and best practices for their festivals, wine trails, again, how to and best practices, how to use social medias, particularly influencers, business models by winery size, distribution, retail, restaurant strategies. So how to, expand out of just selling from the tasting room, developing a regional identity, which is so important for wines throughout the world. And how do we do that in new areas? Engaging in specific target markets, generations, under-engaged markets, etc. And how to conduct market research. And then finally, overlapping missions. Who needs to do what when it comes to market research? Wine boards, wine growers associations, universities, individual companies. There was some difference in feeling on this in the West Coast. There was a sense that when it comes to business and marketing things, that could be done by the associations and the by the individual companies. But in the Midwest and South, where the companies are smaller, they rely a little bit more on universities and other larger entities. So I think that's it for the business and marketing section.
Great.
Great.
Thank you, Dan, very much. Thank you, Patty, Andreea, and Aude, of course, for the great presentation. Just as a reminder to all of our participants, attendees, you can please type any questions you have in the chat box function, and we will answer them during our post-presentation discussion.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Dan, for the great presentation about business and marketing. Here is just a quick question for you. What do you believe the greatest resource needs to address these challenges? So all the challenges we mentioned in terms of viticulture, oenology, business and marketing, what are your thoughts? So if you can scan the QR code and just let us know what you think. And I'm guessing you will put a word. That's really challenging to put just a word for all the resource that might be needed. Oh, you get to put 2 words. So yeah, educate consumers. Mm-hmm. So while you're typing your answers, I just wanted to provide you some update or some insights about the resources that are needed from the industry stakeholder. So as part of the survey, we obtained some responses that were first research. So doing more research on all those different topics, not only research in viticulture, a little bit on enology, but more importantly, education. So providing extension programs, providing just education at universities or in community college. And that's really, I think, what you're mentioning here. So education to consumers as well, developing more collaboration. That's how I think it's gonna help the industry, is making sure there is a good transition, good collaboration, good communication between growers, winemakers, and winery tasting room, and just where you're gonna sell your wines, because everything is connected. If you don't have the consumers, you won't be able to know which wine you're gonna have to produce and which grapes you're gonna need. So yeah, all of that transparency, segmentation of wines, navigating licensing for wineries, distribution. Yeah, that's all good resources. All right, so we have other questions for you, but I think we would like to hear more from you. So what questions do you have from everything that we mentioned? And you might be able to raise your hand. I'm not sure I will be able to give you access to speak, I hope. Nobody has any question? All right, if you don't have a question, I do have one for you, again. So how concerned are you about the challenges the wine industry is facing today? So that's the question about today. How do you feel? So 5. Right. It's pretty high score, 4.4 on average. So that's really a question about today. The next question is going to be, how is it for the next 2 to 5 years? So I hope what we presented today to you is bringing you some insight, some input that can be used to develop a new, to develop more education, more research to help you more. Because yeah, you're concerned about those challenges. Let us know in the chat box what's your most concerns. All right, so how do you feel in the next 2 to 5 years? So we have a question from Celine. Any idea how to develop the last education topic? So how to develop more education? I guess that's the question. That's a good question. We need people, we need time, we need money to develop education. Who does what in the industry?
I often get asked from people interested in learning about winemaking or viticulture, why doesn't the University of Minnesota have a viticulture program or an enology program? And again, University of Minnesota's efforts are primarily based on developing, breeding, new cold climate grape cultivars. It's a fair question to ask, but as you say, more people, more resources, more time. The industry needs to show that it can keep growing. I think both the Minnesota and the South stood out from a lot of the other data, showing what I consider to be issues regarding new, emerging, previously unknown areas, and that is a challenge. I mean, they've been making wine in California for over 150 years, with a little break for prohibition. But these newer regions, a lot of very distinct challenges, a learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
You certainly can't establish a regional identity and a regional level of quality overnight or in one or two vintages. I think it's one of those things that almost requires generations.
Yeah. And so the question was referring the last slide of Dan. Sorry, I'm gonna go back. Oh, I think that's referring to who needs to do what between the wine boards, wine growers association, university, individual companies. And I think you explained that. Yeah, go ahead, Patty.
Yeah, so that definitely came up, and Dan was right that some of that, there was a difference of opinion across the focus groups in terms of this mission. And in the West Coast, we were adamant that a lot of this effort is out of the hands of the university, in part for the business and marketing aspects, because the wine boards and the associations that we have on the West Coast have far more ability to do that work than we do in academia. We're just not nimble enough. We're like trying to move a aircraft carrier on a drop of a hat. At the university, we just can't do that market research. And that's where we felt like that is better suited by the wine boards, the wine growers associations, to do the marketing work. In terms of the education for areas that the extension and land grant institutions do well, that's, for viticulture enology, that falls in the hands of extension and traditional academia. But the marketing is really challenging to do with, the type of work, the type of money that's required to do that. That's for the West Coast. Now it's different in other areas of the US where there's not these strong associations that are existent out there to represent the wine industry.
Yep. And I would add that it also depends on the states. For example, in the Midwest, depending on where you are in the Midwest, you have one association that's going to take care of the business and marketing aspect. But in another state, you won't have that same association, or you might have two associations who have different roles. So I think it's not only depending on the region, but also the states within the different regions. But yeah, Dan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know one of the other, I mean, Patty's exactly right. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily any easier to do the marketing research at the university level in the in the Midwest or the South. However, one of the things that the major associations on the West Coast really don't do that the Midwest and the South needs is a better understanding of the tasting room visitor as a primary consumer, or because the tasting room becomes a point of distribution. A lot of the research done by associations looks at the retail context or even the restaurant context, but not so much about the tasting room as the primary context of distribution. So that's where nobody is serving, and so it's not necessarily that universities are better suited for that. It's just universities are maybe more willing to step up and conduct research where the market isn't already going there. It's underserved.
Yep. Thank you. So let me go quickly into because you are pretty quiet. So the Wine Market Council conduct tasting room visitor research. That's a comment from an attendee. And that's right. The Wine Market Council is doing a lot of research for marketing. And that's where it's helpful, but that's where I think we need to all work together. So collaboration is key, and making sure all the actors or all the people acting in the grape and wine industry should discuss and collaborate. So just some take-home messages. So you've seen all the data we obtained from the survey and the focus group meetings. All the industry needs are the same at the national level. So you can see that viticulture is disease management, pest management. Wherever you are in the US, you have same viticulture challenges or similar challenges. Then it's a bit more unique as climate and industry age change. So what's next in this project? So we submitted a pre-proposal for USDA SCRI, but unfortunately, we have not been asked to submit a full proposal. So we just knew that we heard about this week, actually, or yeah, last week. But we're going to keep working on all those data and helping the industry to become more and more resilient. So we're going to use the data to focus on national, but regional, state research and extension objectives. So the proposal that we did submit, the pre-proposal we did submit to USDA was really to help wine grape growers to develop production decisions, like to use a tool to make decisions in a timely manner, because that's one of the challenge that's common across the different competencies and across the different states. So that's really trying to get a tool that can be used to make decisions depending on where you are, depending on the environment, depending on all those challenges. So we're going to keep doing all that work. I wanted also to mention that everything that was presented today, the research was supported by the Intramural Research Program of the USDA, NIFA, Specialty Crop, so SCRI, number 20, 23, 51, 181, 41, 189. The findings and conclusions in this preliminary presentation have not been formally disseminated by the USDA and should not be construed to represent any agency determination or policy. So
Aude, I want to just mention something. One of the things that I think was really valuable in this exercise of a national team coming together to do a unified survey that was very general. I've never seen that before. And so I think that was really powerful, and I'm glad that we're sharing some of this information, and we'll continue to dig into the data a bit more from both the surveys and the focus group and sharing that information, because to do this level of work as an individual is really challenging. And even if it doesn't go any further from a standpoint of a grant of some sort or a proposal, I do think there is a lot of value in this exercise. And I know I thank you and Kane for leading that effort. It wasn't easy to pull all of us together and the team that everybody saw on that slide early on. So it was really valuable. And I'm glad that growers came to the table and completed the survey, which I know a lot of times you get asked to do that a lot, and then showed up for some of these focus group meetings. So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Patty. Once again, thank you to all of you for helping in this project, plus everybody else, but also for presenting today. So if you have any questions, please send an email to any of us, even to Drew, because Drew is doing a great job. He knows a lot about the industry, not only in the Midwest, but also on the West Coast. And so on that note, so if you don't have any questions, I would like to thank you for listening all about and learning all about viticulture and winemaking and business and marketing challenges of the US grape and wine industry. I want to make sure you are aware of the upcoming webinars. So we're going to do a webinar on July 1st about the innovation technologies for small wineries, and then August 5 on bulk storage management and consideration. So please mark your calendar. Also, if you want to watch the recording of today, you can scan the QR code. You should also have a link that was shared during the advertisement of the webinar. So you should be able to access the recording of today, but also of the previous webinars that we did. And once again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact any of us. So thanks very much. Have a good season. Harvest is coming. It's not yet, but it's coming. So good luck, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. The July 1st webinar is some great new information, new techniques for small wineries on how to increase color, manage acidity, lower alcohol, a lot of interesting new topics to cover July 1st. So we'll hope to see you all there.
Right.
Nice
Thank
to
you
meet
so much. Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Dan. Thanks,
Bye.
Patty. Have a good night, Dan. Bye.